Welcome to Conversations at the Crossroads, the podcast where spirituality meets the beautiful, messy experience of being a human. I'm Jenny, tarot reader, Reiki practitioner, witch, mentor, hairstylist, and the voice behind Conversations at the Crossroads. Each week, we gather here at the Crossroads to explore spirituality, personal growth, and the tools that help us navigate an ever-evolving journey. Some conversations will dive into the mystical, others into the practical, and sometimes we'll just sit together through the hard stuff. Along the way, we may explore ideas that challenge us, stories that shift our perspective, or practices that help us walk our path with a little more intention. So, wherever you're listening from, take a breath, settle in, and join me on the crossroads. I want to start today with something a little different. I've been listening to Hamilton on repeat this week, from start to finish, over and over again. And I keep getting to the same moments and feeling that familiar tingle behind my eyes, that prickly, teary eyed feeling, and really questioning why it's moving me so much right now. Why now? Why this week? Why this musical that I've listened to many times before? And while I've been moved, it hasn't had such a visceral emotional reaction. But in the words of Lin-Manuel Miranda in the song My Shot, are we a nation of states? What's the state of our nation? A few days from now, as of this recording, this country, America, turns 250 years old. It's not a normal run of the mill 4th of July that many of us are used to. This is the 250th, the semi quincentennial. Most Americans will only ever live through one of these, and this is ours. And the sky above us right now is louder than it has been in nearly 2.5 centuries. So today, we're going to be talking about revolution, the one that founded this country, the one that Lin-Manuel Miranda reimagined and put into the mouths of Black and brown and immigrant performers, the one the stars are literally pointing to right now in this exact week, and the one that might be quietly asking to happen inside of you. This is going to get political. This is also going to be spiritual, and it's going to hold some paradox. And I really hope it's also going to fire you up. So let's set the stage. The 250th anniversary of American independence is not a normal patriotic holiday. This is a once in a lifetime civic moment. The last one, the bicentennial in 1976, happened in a country coming out of Vietnam and Watergate, a country trying to desperately remember what it stood for after a decade of losing its own thread. This 250th is happening in a country asking the same question with even more urgency. And I don't know a single spiritually awake person right now who isn't holding some version of this tension. The tension, I mean, is you love the idea of this country, or at least you love the ideals it was supposed to be built on: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the audacious dream that ordinary people could govern themselves. That freedom of speech and religion and assembly weren't privileges granted by a king, but rights that belonged to a human being just for being alive. At the exact same time, you're watching those ideals be trampled. You're watching rights be stripped. You're watching the powerful protect themselves at the expense of the vulnerable. You're watching the country do the opposite of what it claimed to stand for. And it's infuriating. Both of those things are true at once: the love and the rage, the hope and the grief, The being moved by Hamilton and being furious at what's been done in the name of America. I want to be clear that tension is not a personal failing. The tension is not you being naive or idealistic or not political enough or too political. That tension is the actual spiritual work of being alive in this country right now. And here's a reflection I want to leave with you before we move on. What does it mean to love something that keeps letting you down? Because that's the question at the center of this episode. That's the question at the center of the 250th anniversary. That's the question a lot of you are living inside of right now, whether it's about your country or your family, your religion or your marriage or your body, your career, or just your own becoming. So let's talk about the sky. I want to tell you something that blew my mind when I learned about the current transits. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was 1777 to 1797. It's not just a random timeline. That's the exact window of the American Revolution and the drafting of the Constitution. Pluto keeps Pluto rules deep transformation, death and rebirth, the tearing down of anything built on a rotten foundation. And Aquarius rules the collective, the people, revolution, networks, the dream of a more just future. That was the sky that was overhead while a group of flawed, brilliant, complicated colonists were writing, "We hold these truths to be self evident." Pluto takes about 248 years to make one full trip around the zodiac. Guess where it is right now? Back in Aquarius, the first time since 1777. The first time since this country was being dreamed into being. That alone gives me chills. Now, add this to it. In April of this year, Uranus entered Gemini. And Uranus is not a subtle planet. Uranus is the great awakener, a lightning bolt, the revolution planet, the planet that shows up in your life to shatter what was too small to hold you anymore. The last time Uranus was in Gemini was 1941 to 1949. If that sounds familiar, because that was the World War II. The time before that, 1858 to 1866, was the Civil War. And before that, the Revolutionary War era. Every single Uranus return of the United States has coincided with a major American reckoning, the founding, the Civil War, the Second World War, and now the place we're inside right now. And then on July 17th of this year, 13 days after the 4th of July, Uranus and Gemini will trine Pluto in Aquarius. This is one of the biggest, most stabilizing, most generative aspects the outer planets can make. Revolution and deep transformation, holding hands in agreement, working together. It's not doomsday astrology. It's not the world is ending. This is the sky saying something is being born right now, and it's going to require you to rise up to meet it. Aquarius is about the people. Gemini is about ideas, communication, information, the stories we tell each other about who we are. Pluto tears down. Uranus lights up. Together, they are dismantling the old story of America and asking a new one to be told. Louder, truer, more inclusive, and more honest. You were not born into this moment by accident. You're here because you're supposed to be here. And the sky is not asking for permission, it's already here. So, what does that feel like in your body right now to know that you were born for this exact moment, for this transition, for this reckoning? Not for a quiet life, but for this one. Sit with that for a second. Now, we have to do something important. We can't talk about the American Revolution and the founding or the ideals of this country without telling the whole truth. And I refuse to be the kind of spiritual voice that skips the ugly part in order to keep the message pretty. The men who wrote All Men Are Created Equal enslaved human beings while they wrote it. Thomas Jefferson, the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, the man whose pen gave us that immortal line, owned more than 600 enslaved people in his lifetime. He fathered children with an enslaved woman named Sally Hemings, who couldn't consent because she was legally property. He wrote about liberty while denying it to the people who cooked his food and raised his children. Native people who had lived on this land for thousands of years before any Europeans set foot on it were being systematically removed, killed, and stripped of their sovereignty, while the founders drew borders and divided up the country. The Declaration itself, that gorgeous document, refers to the indigenous nations as quote unquote merciless Indian savages in one of its final grievances against the king. Women had no vote, no legal identity separate from their husbands, no property rights, no political voice, and so the we in We the People was really extraordinarily narrow. It meant why it meant white landowning men, and that was it at the time. And I'm not saying all of this to make you cynical about the 4th of July, and I'm not telling you this to tear down the founders. I'm telling you this because you can't honor a revolution without also honoring who paid the price for it. Any spiritual reading of America has to hold this. Otherwise, it's not spiritual. It's just a fairy tale wrapped in stars and stripes. In the song History Has Its Eyes on You, George Washington is warning Hamilton about being watched by history, about legacy, and the mistakes that follow you. History has its eyes on all of them. It sees the genius and the hypocrisy, the vision and the violence, the dream and the denial. And here's the thing that Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave who became one of the greatest orators this country has ever produced, he said better than anyone. In 1852, he was invited to give a 4th of July speech in Rochester, New York. And what he delivered was now considered one of the most important speeches in American history. He said, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn." Let that settle. You may rejoice. I must mourn. He was standing in front of a room of white Americans, celebrating their freedom, and he told them the truth. That freedom was not his. That liberty they were celebrating had been denied to him and millions of people who looked like him. That their 4th of July was not a holiday for everyone. And yet, Douglas didn't throw the whole thing away or deny to be there or deny speaking. He held the tension. He said the ideals of this country are worth fighting for, even though the country has failed to live up to them as of yet. He said the promises of the Declaration are still promises, and the American people have to be held to them. That is the spiritual assignment, not to worship the founders and not to burn it all down, but to hold both and demand more. It makes me think, where in our lives have we been given beautiful and poignant advice by a flawed person? Whether it's a parent, a teacher, a religious tradition, a mentor, how do you carry that knowledge or information or that gift without carrying the wound of the person who gave it? Here's where the light comes back in, because here's what Lin-Manuel Miranda did that I think is genuinely extraordinary. He looked at the same complicated founding, the same story of brilliant, flawed men, the same set of ideals that were written by people who did not fully live them, And instead of throwing it all out, instead of sanitizing it, he did something braver. He cast Black, brown, and immigrant actors in the roles of the founders themselves. He said, "These are the faces that built this country. These are the descendants of the people who were erased from the original story. These are the voices that were locked out of the founding, and now they get to speak the founders' words. They get to reclaim the story. They get to be centered in a moment that they were systematically excluded from." And that to me is like a spell. That's a reclamation. That's exactly what Pluto and Aquarius is asking of us, to dismantle the old story of who gets to be American, to hand the microphone to the people who were originally silenced, to say the diversity of voices at the founding was always there, just uncredited, and now we're going to credit them loudly in a song. In the song, My Shot, it is about the scrappy, immigrant, hungry energy of young revolutionaries who refused to be counted out. It's a song not just about Alexander Hamilton. It's about every immigrant, every outsider, every person who has been told they're not enough and deciding that they're going to build something anyway. It's about the hunger that founds nations. It's about the belief that you can be part of writing history even when history has not made room for you yet. That is the actual founding spirit. That is what fired up the people who fought in the revolution. Not the powdered wigs, not the mahogany desks, the hunger, and the ideals themselves. Let me read you some words that started it all. The words a lot of you all know by heart, even if you can't recite them from memory. Written in 1776, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." That line was aspirational when it was written. It was aspirational for everyone that the quote unquote all men phrase excluded, which was almost everyone. It has been aspirational for 250 years, and it's still aspirational now. That's not a failure. That's an assignment. The founders wrote a check the country has never fully cashed, and every generation since has been forced to decide whether to honor the ideal or accept the limitation. Here's another one from the Declaration that doesn't get quoted enough. Quote, "That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government," end quote. That is a founding document endorsing revolution, written into the DNA of this country, the right and the responsibility of the people to change the government when it stops serving them. That's not a bug in the system. That is the whole point. And then 15 years later, the Bill of Rights, drafted 1789, ratified in 1791, right in the middle of the last Pluto and Aquarius transit, same as the sky right now. Let me read you the First Amendment. Quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." End quote. Every clause of that sentence is being tested right now in real time. Every clause was written by people who understood viscerally what it meant to live without those rights. Every clause is a spell of protection that we have to keep casting. And I have to give you Abigail Adams, because we can't talk about the founding without a woman's voice from inside it. In March of 1776, while her husband, John, was in Philadelphia helping draft the Declaration, she wrote him a letter, and she said, quote, "Remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such an unlimited power to the hands of the husbands. Remember that all men would be tyrants if they could. End quote. Abigail Adams calling out the founders in a letter in real time as they were literally drafting the founding documents, reminding them that liberty for men and tyranny for women is not liberty. In the song The Story of Tonight, the young revolutionaries raise a glass in a tavern, dreaming out loud, believing that their story will be told, innocent and aspirational and hopeful. And that's what I want you to hold: a room full of dreamers, young, tired, hungry, hopeful, terrified, raising a glass, believing that what they were doing mattered, not knowing if they would win, dreaming anyway. Now, everything I said about the country is also true for you. Revolution is not only political, it's spiritual, it's personal. Pluto in Aquarius is not just tearing down an old political order. Pluto in Aquarius is tearing down whatever old order you were built on. The old story about your worth, the old rules about who gets to speak, the old inheritance of shame or silence or smallness that you did not choose, but that you inherited anyway. The old founding documents of the family you grew up in, or the religion you were raised in, or the version of yourself that got you this far, but's not going to carry you the rest of the way. What in your life was founded on a lie? What in you was told it was equal, but was treated as less? Where do you need to draft your own Declaration of Independence this summer? Because that's what the sky is offering right now. This is a once in a 250-year window to rewrite the founding documents of your own life, to decide what you hold to be self-evident, to decide what your unalienable rights actually are, to decide what you will no longer be governed by. So, for a small exercise, something you can do this week is get a piece of paper or open your journal. Start with a sentence and finish it in your own words. I hold these truths to be self-evident. What do you know is true about you, about your worth, about your voice, that you have been talked out of? What do you know deep down that the world keeps trying to overwrite? Write it, claim it, make it self-evident again. Then you can also write your own Bill of Rights, 10 inviolable rights of the free version of you. Not what you're afraid to ask for, but what you actually deserve. The right to rest, the right to say no, the right to change your mind, to want more, the right to leave, the right to be believed, the right to be wrong and still be loved. Whatever yours are, write them down. That, in a way, is a spell. It's a founding document. It's your own personal semi-quincentennial energetic document. The founders were not perfect. They were dreamers, hypocrites and mystics, revolutionaries, slaveholders, geniuses, and cowards. They were exactly as messy as we are, and they still managed to write down a set of ideals bigger than themselves. Big enough that 250 years later, we're still fighting over how to live up to them. Lin-Manuel Miranda reminded us that the story of this country was always meant to be told by the people who were originally locked out of telling it. That the diversity of voices at the founding was always there, just uncredited, and that the hunger and freedom of justice belonged to everyone, not just the men whose names ended up on the documents. Frederick Douglass reminded us that any celebration of freedom that leaves people out is not freedom. The ideals of this country are worth fighting for, and the country has to be held accountable for them. And Abigail Adams reminded us that women have been quietly correcting the men in power since before the ink was dry on the founding in the sky right now is telling us at this moment, at 250, is another founding, another Pluto in Aquarius, another Uranus return, another chance to decide who we want to be, not just as a country, as a person, as a soul in a specific body at a specific moment in a specific history. You were not born into this moment by accident. You are here because you're supposed to be here. The story of this country is still being told. The question is, who gets to tell it and what do they choose to remember? And that's not just a question about America. That's a question about you, about what you're going to do with the years that you're still here, about what you're going to leave behind, about whose stories you're going to make sure get told. So this 4th of July, whether you're celebrating or mourning, protesting, grilling or resting, or just trying to survive, I want you to know something. The same energy that fired up the revolutionaries is fired up in you. The stars are literally the same. The sky over Philadelphia in 1776 is the sky over you tonight. Pluto is in the same seat. The same dream is on the table. That country could still be possible. That version of you could still be possible, but only if we rise up to meet it. So, think of these things and reflect on the questions I posed throughout as your journal prompts and reflection points this week. And through the rest of the week, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, and I can't wait to see you again on the crossroads. Bye!